When is a machine not a machine? When it's a jar. Get it? Oh, okay. Hello, interwebs. I hope you are all doing well because I am here to review the latest episode of Alien Earth. This one, Season 1, Episode 3. And y'all, it is so nice to have a franchise science fiction show that is actually good and filled with depth and ideas and meaning and is actually entertaining at the same time. I'm not going to spoil for you all, but if you have been watching my reviews of Star Trek Strange New Worlds this season, it's been a rough go with my favorite franchise right now, and I've got the screeners for the rest of the season, and the next 2 episodes coming out that I just recorded my reviews for, they're not great. I'll just leave it there. I won't say too much more because I don't want to spoil for you. So I say that because I come into Alien Earth and I'm like, oh God, it's like a feast after a famine. This show is so good, and it's helped a lot by the fact that this is, again, I said this in my review of the first 2 episodes, categorically my shit. I love stories that deal with corporatization, exploitation, our horror stuff, our dealing with what it means to be human, dealing with android bodies and uploaded selves. Like, all of that stuff is like my favorite type of questions to explore. And this show is doing it so freaking well. Staying kind of general on this episode first, and I'll get into some of like the specific nitty-gritty things, and there's a lot of specific nitty-gritty things to talk about here because this show is just filled to the brim with interesting ideas and philosophy that I want to discuss. But staying top level, I am really excited by the fact that this episode moves us into an entirely new scenario so damn quickly. It could have very easily stayed in the setup that we had in the first 2 episodes for pretty much the entire season. It was a really good setup of like a ship crashes on Earth and the aliens have gotten out and we're trying to contain them because, you know, the xenomorphs get out on Earth. We're kind of fucked in a lot of ways. Like, that was the whole kind of concern at the end of the 4th Alien movie. Not a great Alien movie. Actually, probably my least favorite of all of them. Yeah, I would probably say the 4th one is my least favorite of all of them, even worse than Alien 3. I think it's hurt by the fact that it's Joss Whedon-isms have become like the standard of things like the MCU. So I have a lower estimation of it than I did at the time. Regardless, that's an aside. That was the whole worry at the end of that movie, is like the aliens getting on Earth. Oh shit, what will we do then? And you could have had that be the main thing with this whole show, with that setup. But here we're kind of moving on into an entirely different status quo really quickly, and I like that. It feels like things are moving on really, really well. I would even argue that it might have even moved on too quickly, because the beginning of this episode where Wendy goes and saves her brother feels like she kind of got there very, very easily, very, very quickly after the cliffhanger of last week's episode. So I think that would be my only major knock in terms of that structure. I think things could have gone even a little bit slower and reveled in the tension of that. But frankly, if it's a choice between staying too long in that story beat and going too fast through it, I'd rather go too fast through it and just get to the more interesting concepts and ideas that are going on here. So, So I'm just glad we're going here. I will say, at the top of the episode, I was a little surprised that Wendy's brother wasn't dead. Like, it doesn't fit. I mean, maybe I'm misremembering. It's been a while since I watched all the other Alien movies. It doesn't really fit the Xenomorph's MO to lay a trap like that. There might be some cases of that. I remind me in the comments if I am forgetting. But I would have thought that Xenomorph would have killed her brother and then killed her. But obviously that would, end that relationship pretty damn quickly here. And I will say there was some tense moments as they were fighting the Xenomorph. And I, again, was shocked when Wendy actually killed it. I was like, oh, damn, we're already done with the Xenomorph. At least this Xenomorph. We'll kind of clearly get some more. But what I liked about this, and I know we're going to get more Xenomorphs because we have the Xenomorph eggs that get taken by the Prodigy Corporation. But it then puts the focus a little bit more on the other aliens that they captured. I mean, there's clearly some setup for not only the little eye monster thing that everyone really loves and I particularly love, but also that weird, like, pod thing that we don't really know what it does, but we got little hints of at the end of the last episode, and they kind of remind us of here. Like, clearly that's being set up for some freaky shit to go down with that later on in the season, which I'm excited for. But just thinking on it, like, we have so hyper-focused on the Xenomorph as the main character of the Alien franchise, especially after Sigourney Weaver is no longer a part of it. And as a result, it kind of removes a little bit of what made the first few Alien films so existentially horrifying, which is you don't really know what the Xenomorph can do. We kind of know exactly what it can do now. And so having new aliens that can do new things kind of bring back the existential horror of, oh shit, this is something completely new that we are just out of our depths on. The Xenomorph is known, so having new aliens where we don't know what they do is just a cool thing to set up and brings back that type of horror that the original Alien brought so well. So loving that, but I also really like that we get the main characters of this show learning what the Xenomorphs can do so quickly, like that moment where Timothy Olyphant protects Boy Cavalier from getting the face hugger stuck on him and getting to be an incubator for another Xenomorph. I like that they already know what it can do. Again, there'll probably be a containment breach at some point down the line, and we'll get another fully fledged Xenomorph or multiple. But I do like that it's not just the characters being like, ooh, what's this? I don't know. And then you're kind of like that Prometheus situation from the first movie where that guy just looked down the barrel of the like, ooh, what's this little weird alien slug thing? I'll just stare right at it and get myself killed. So I like that characters are smart and prepared for those things. Now, for most of this episode, Wendy is out of commission. We kind of get a little bit more focus on the rest of the Lost Boys. And I want to speak specifically first about Curly, who is the girl who has this whole conversation at the beginning about, why didn't we get to choose our names? Why are we called Lost Boys? Half of us are girls. That's very trans. The show is not overtly dealing with, trans people directly, but this is why I always love uploaded consciousness and body stuff within science fiction, because it generally will touch upon very trans themes of control and getting to have autonomy, getting to name yourself, and relating it to gender and like how they sort of view even this group as the Lost Boys, naming them after Peter Pan, even though they're half girls. That brings in some themes of how gender is assumed and how boys are sort of considered to be the norm. So, there's subtle themes of gender overtly in there, but it's more about naming and autonomy, which are very trans themes that I relate to. Not just trans themes. They obviously apply to corporatism and control and all of that stuff that's, the Alien franchise has always dealt with, but that is exactly why the Alien franchise specifically and robots and things like that so uniquely interest me. And we get more stuff like that when we have our other two Lost Boys meet with Morrow, who is sort of curious, like, oh, you're acting like kids, and he's kind of figuring out very quickly who these kids are. And I really loved that on a few levels, because we get Morrow kind of giving this speech about how, he doesn't really have control of his own life, that he says he's the worst parts of a man, and Mother telling him to leave the people on his ship to die, and him kind of feeling guilt at that he has just become a company machine in a lot of ways. And he asked the question to the kids, when is a machine not a machine? Talking about them having parents and such. And I think, on the surface, the thing is they're humans uploaded into a machine body. But there's a larger philosophical question being asked there, and it has to do with autonomy. These kids have their own personality and self that Morrow doesn't get to have because he is such a company being. He even says later on when he talks to Yutani, he doesn't have a home, he doesn't have a family. This is his mission. He wants to go and get these aliens back, but it's not even for himself, it's for the company. He's just kind of a non-person at this point. So when is a machine on a machine? When they get to be free. Not because they have a human consciousness in them, but when they're free from being exploited by someone above them. It's the same question of when do we become human? When we free ourselves from oppression. If you ever look into the history of words like robot, robot actually comes from a Czech play that was one of the first science fiction plays in the 1920s, and the word robot literally means labor. The robots in fiction, generally are about working class dynamics. And so, bring it into when is a machine not a machine, and asking these questions about corporate control and exploitation really does sort of bring that all those themes to mind. And even if you want to get even more overt about it, Morrow kind of, I don't know if it was intentionally done, but he kind of obliquely whether accidentally or directly, references Asimov's 3 laws of robotics. He says, could you allow someone else to come to harm? Talking about, the people that he allowed to die on the Yutani ship. And the 3 laws of robotics were about humans controlling robots. And there's, Asimov's whole discussion about robots and control and things like that, and getting into the Foundation series. That's a whole other thing to download. But it is about, these laws were put into robots to make them protect human beings and be something that we control for us, use them for our labor rather than as autonomous beings on their own. And so whether, it was Noah Hawley's intention to directly evoke those, the 3 laws of robotics, it's clearly something being thematically dealt with in a very similar way here. So I just loved all of that stuff. And then we get the character, I believe her name is Curly? I'm getting some of them, they're mixed up, but there was the one who wants to be the new favorite Boy Cavalier, and she goes and sees him, and I like that she's just trying to prove herself by I learned French, I have all this knowledge, and she's trying to prove that she's smarter and better. She has this very eugenics-y, I'm the superior version, because she wants to get approval from the person above her, from Daddy Boy Cavalier to a degree. And at the same time, Boy Cavalier, and this kind of gets more into his mindset that we learned a little bit of last episode, where he was I want to talk with someone smarter than myself. And obviously that showcases a level of ego on his part, even though he says it's not. But he also says, children have this access to infinite imagination. And I think what he's trying to get at, and this is so fascinating to give to the mind of a trillionaire, billionaire, tech oligarch kind of character, which is he wants to be able, what he really wants, I think, is to be able to think outside the confines of the world and system that he has built within, capitalism. But because he is a trillionaire, because he is someone at the top of the heap in terms of power, he's unable to ever talk to anyone honestly who can be open and give him something new to engage with, something interesting to engage with that's not just all within these dynamics of power and exploitation. And so he wants these kids to give him this chance of thinking of something new, but the thing that's keeping him from learning something new is not people being dumb. It's the fact that he's in control of them and exploits them and doesn't allow them to express themselves fully. And we get little hints of that when we see the one scientist kind of being oh man, when he put Wendy in danger as this piece of equipment. And I also like the conversation there between the psychologist and the scientist. The scientist guy still sees Wendy as a piece of equipment, where the psychologist kind of sees Wendy as a person that she needs to care for, though she has certain ideas of what Wendy should be as a human versus a machine. So there's some interesting stuff going on there. But the main thing of that scene, though, for me, is the scientist is not really willing to stand up to Boy Cavalier because he knows he could lose his job. And I like Boy Cavalier being grow a spine. And he wants someone to kind of be equal to him in footing in terms of getting some engagement. But you do know if that scientist ever did say something really truly that got into Boy Cavalier's skin, Boy Cavalier could kick him out of his job, make him destitute, literally have him killed and disappeared. So the guy really can't be earnest and have a spine truly, because it could put him in danger. And despite it being the very thing that Boy Cavalier wants. So again, it's such a good understanding of the ways these tech oligarchs think of they want to innovate and try to do something new, but really all they can think about is capitalism, for lack of a better descriptor. Those ideas of power and control. Even if they are trying to reach for something else, they really can never break out of that mindset. Look at any of these guys, like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, people like that. They want to so desperately say that they're innovating and coming up with new ideas, but all they can imagine is, just endless capitalism. They say they want Star Trek, but they just are creating the Expanse because they fundamentally can't understand how to get to a Star Trek future. So just really, really loved all of that. A couple of the random things here. There's still the cleaning of the stain on the wall. I do wonder if that's hinting at the fact that the human bodies of a lot of the Lost Boys were killed. Someone in the comments last week made a note of that fact that oh, maybe when they uploaded into their android bodies, the quote-unquote original versions of them were actually still alive, and they killed them. And that's what that stain is that needs to be cleaned up or something like that. Maybe not. Maybe there's something else going on with that stain. I'm curious to see where it goes, but I think that that's probably what that is alluding to. I think that's all the major stuff that I wanted to touch upon. A few other things. Obviously, Wendy has some level of connection to the Xenomorphs now, based on whatever happened during her fight with it. I just continue to love Timothy Oliphant being like a dad, like to the kids, being like read with your eyes. Like, I love all of that stuff. That's a lot of fun. Just all that sort of stuff. So we'll see where the rest of this goes, where Wendy's brother is going to come back into this. So a lot to still play with here, but this is just an utter delight. Like, it's moving the show along, moving this story along. There's still some interesting action adventure, but for me, the philosophy is where I'm just living and breathing, and the philosophy here is just rich and textured and layered and so much to talk about, and it's very, very thoughtful. Obviously, the show in its final few episodes could really all fuck it up or whatever, but this is what I come to science fiction for. This is what I like so much. And again, comparing to other shows like Star Trek Strange New Worlds, which are just kind of trying to be fun, empty sci-fi action adventures without any really thought or depth put into what they're actually saying, to the point where, again, without spoiling, the next few episodes say some really terrible shit that I think just comes from people not thinking things through and just wanting to be a fun little sci-fi show. It's just, it's nice to see a show that's actually given depth to its meaning, and actually connects with, philosophy, history, and other science fiction, both within the franchise and outside of it. So, loving this show. This is great. What do you think, though? I'd love to hear all your thoughts about Alien Earth in the down below, but beyond that, I hope you, my friends, live long and prosper.